Some cities were never meant to be found. Some were swallowed by desert winds, carved into cliffs, or buried beneath centuries of silence. Tonight, we're travelling through places that once held power, belief, trade, and ambition, from lost desert fortresses in Oman to stone cities carved into mountains, from prehistoric pyramids in Peru to forgotten sanctuaries rising above the clouds in Turkey. These are not legends alone. They are real places, shaped by real hands and slowly reclaimed by time. Where are you watching from tonight? And what time is it there? Settle in, breathe slowly. The Golden Tongue Burials of Taposiris Magna. Along Egypt's northern coast, west of Alexandria, where desert wind meets the Mediterranean light, the ruins of an ancient temple complex rise quietly from the sand. The site is known as Taposiris Magna, a Greco-Roman era city built near Lake Mariette, long associated with worship of Osiris and later entangled in speculation about Cleopatra's lost tomb. For centuries, the ruins rested in silence. Then, during recent excavations, archaeologists uncovered something small but deeply symbolic, a mummy with a tongue made of gold. The discovery did not come from a royal pyramid or a grand hidden chamber. It came from a burial shaft beneath temple ruins, part of a necropolis that had remained undisturbed for nearly 2,000 years. When researchers carefully unwrapped one of the mummified individuals, they found a thin golden amulet placed inside the mouth, shaped like a human tongue. It was not decoration, it was deliberate. It was symbolic. In ancient Egyptian belief, speech mattered beyond death. The journey into the afterlife was not silent. The deceased would face divine judgment, particularly before Osiris, ruler of the underworld. To speak in that realm, to defend one's soul, to answer questions, to recite sacred texts, required the power of voice. A golden tongue may have been placed to ensure that power. Gold, in Egyptian cosmology, was not simply wealth. It was associated with eternity, with the flesh of the gods, with incorruptibility. Unlike bronze or iron, gold does not rust or decay. It remains luminous through time. To place gold within the mouth of the deceased was to grant permanence to speech itself. The burials at Taposiris Magna date largely to the Ptolemaic and early Roman periods, roughly between the 3rd century BCE and the 2nd century CE. This was a time when Egypt was no longer ruled by native pharaohs, but by Greek-descended dynasties beginning with Ptolemy I, one of Alexander the Great's generals. The blending of Greek and Egyptian traditions shaped the religious landscape of the era. Taposiris Magna, meaning Great Tomb of Osiris, became a centre where these cultural influences merged. Temples honoured Egyptian deities, but architectural elements reflected Hellenistic style. Burial customs evolved as well. The Golden Tongue burials are part of that evolution. Archaeologists found multiple mummies within the site's shafts, some adorned with gilded funerary masks, others wrapped in elaborate linen with amulets placed carefully among the layers. In several cases, the Golden Tongue amulet appeared as a consistent ritual feature. The placement was precise, inside the mouth, not visible externally. It was meant for the next world, not this one. When excavators revealed the first Golden Tongue, photographs circulated quickly. The image was striking, the thin metallic shape resting where flesh had long since disappeared. It felt both delicate and profound. Yet this was not an isolated practice. Similar examples of gold tongue amulets have been discovered in other Greco-Roman Egyptian burials, suggesting a broader ritual tradition during this transitional era. Still, the concentration at Taposiris Magna gave the discovery special attention. The temple complex itself adds depth to the story. Built during the reign of Ptolemy II Philadelphus in the 3rd century BCE, The temple stood on a ridge between the Mediterranean and Lake Mariotte. Its location suggests strategic and spiritual importance. The area connected coastal trade routes with inland agricultural zones. The necropolis surrounding the temple indicates that people sought burial close to sacred ground. To be interred near a temple of Osiris may have been considered spiritually advantageous. Some archaeologists working at the site, including Dr. Kathleen Martinez, have also pursued the long-standing theory that Cleopatra VII and Mark Antony may have been buried somewhere within or near Taposiris Magna. While no definitive evidence has confirmed that theory, the site's prominence during the late Ptolemaic period keeps the possibility alive. The Golden Tongue burials, however, belong to ordinary individuals, not queens or generals, but members of a community navigating cultural change under Greek and Roman rule. Their burials reveal belief continuity. Even under foreign dynasties, Egyptian ideas about the afterlife endured. The judgment scene described in the Book of the Dead remained central. The heart would be weighed against the feather of Maat. Words spoken in defense of the soul mattered deeply. Without speech, one could not plead innocence. Without voice, one could not enter eternity. The Golden Tongue becomes more than ornament. It becomes preparation. Excavation at Taposiris Magna continues to uncover tombs, coins bearing the faces of Ptolemaic rulers, and fragments of statues that once stood in there. Temple courtyards. The site carries layers of time, pharaonic foundations, Hellenistic reconstruction, Roman occupation, and beneath it all, burial shafts descending into darkness. Inside those shafts, carefully wrapped bodies lay undisturbed for centuries. The climate of northern Egypt aided preservation, though not with the dryness of Upper Egypt's desert tombs. Many mummies show signs of age and collapse, yet the gold remains intact. Gold always remains. Standing among the ruins today, one sees fallen columns, eroded limestone blocks, and open sky above. The Mediterranean breeze moves across the site. It is difficult to imagine the once active temple complex that stood here. But beneath the earth, the story continues. The Golden Tongue burials of Taposiris Magna do not suggest supernatural mystery. They reveal theological precision, a belief that communication transcends death, that identity survives, that speech carries weight in realms unseen. They remind us that ancient people prepared carefully for journeys beyond the visible world, not with grand monuments alone, but with small, meaningful objects placed where no living eye would see them. A thin sheet of gold, shaped like a tongue, resting quietly within the silence of a mummy's mouth. And in that quiet symbolism, beneath the coastal sky of northern Egypt, the people of Taposiris Magna left behind a message about eternity, not carved on walls, but hidden within the space where words were once formed, trusting that even in death their voices would endure. The severed hands of avarice. In the northeastern Nile Delta, beneath layers of mud brick and shifting soil, lies the ancient city of Avaris, once a powerful capital during one of Egypt's most turbulent periods. Today, the site is known as Tel El Daba, but nearly 4,000 years ago it was a thriving centre of trade, migration, and eventually foreign rule. And beneath the courtyard of a palace at Avaris, archaeologists uncovered something unexpected, a pit filled with severed human hands. The discovery was made during excavations led by the Austrian Archaeological Institute, working at the palace complex believed to date to the Hyksos period, around the 17th to 16th centuries BCE. The Hyksos were rulers of foreign origin, likely from the Levant, who gained control over parts of northern Egypt during what is known as the Second Intermediate Period. Their rule has long been debated in Egyptian history. They introduced new technologies, including the horse-drawn chariot and certain weapon styles, but their presence also marked a period of political fragmentation. Within the palace forecourt at Avaris, archaeologists identified carefully dug pits. Inside them lay human right hands, detached cleanly at the wrist. They were not scattered randomly. They had been deliberately arranged, palms facing downward, fingers slightly spread. In total, at least a dozen hands were found in separate deposits. The question was immediate and unsettling. Why were these hands severed? And why were they buried in the courtyard of a royal palace? Ancient Egyptian texts provide part of the answer. In later New Kingdom inscriptions, particularly from the reign of Ahmose I, there are references to the practice of presenting the severed hands of enemies as proof of victory in battle. Soldiers who brought back hands from slain opponents were rewarded with gold, often described as the gold of valour. The severed hand was not random brutality, it was documentation. In a time without written battlefield reports or identification systems, the hand served as undeniable evidence of a kill. The discovery at Avaris pushes the origin of this practice earlier than previously confirmed in physical evidence. It suggests that the ritual of counting and rewarding severed hands may have begun during the Hyksos period. Anthropological analysis of the remains revealed that the hands likely belonged to adult males. The cut marks indicate deliberate and skillful separation, likely performed shortly after death. The bones show no signs of haphazard removal. These were not accidental injuries. They were purposeful removals. The positioning within the palace courtyard suggests a ceremonial aspect. It is possible that victorious soldiers presented the hands directly before the ruler, perhaps in a public display of loyalty and triumph. The burial pits may have served as a formalised disposal method after the counting and reward ceremony was completed. The courtyard location is significant. This was not a battlefield grave, it was the centre of political power. Avaris itself was strategically placed in the Nile Delta, acting as a gateway between Egypt and the Levant. Its population was culturally mixed, reflecting trade networks and migration patterns of the Bronze Age Eastern Mediterranean. The Hyksos rulers adopted many aspects of Egyptian administration and culture, yet they maintained distinct identities as foreign elites. The severed hands could represent a practice that blended Levantine traditions with Egyptian symbolic systems. In Egyptian ideology, bodily integrity was important for the afterlife. Mummification aimed to preserve the body whole. Removing a hand symbolically deprived the enemy of completeness, perhaps denying them power in death. But the act also functioned practically. It was a count, a record, a reward system tied directly to warfare. Standing at Tel el-Dabba today, the site appears quiet and unassuming. Mud brick foundations outline former palace rooms. The Nile Delta stretches green and fertile beyond excavation trenches. Yet beneath that calm surface lies evidence of organised military culture. The severed hands of Avaris do not tell a story of random violence. They tell a story of structure, of hierarchy, of reward and recognition. They reflect a society where warfare was formalised and documented through ritualised acts. Later, Egyptian pharaohs would celebrate victories with inscriptions carved into temple walls, listing enemy numbers and boasting of dominance. The physical act of presenting severed hands may have evolved into symbolic representation over time. But here, at Avaris, we see the practice in its raw archaeological form. No inscription, no dramatic relief carving, only bone, carefully placed. Archaeologists documented the orientation of each hand. Most were right hands, reinforcing the idea of standardized collection, the separation at the R. Wrist suggests an understanding of anatomy sufficient to remove the hand efficiently. It is possible that the hands were displayed briefly before burial, perhaps counted publicly in the courtyard before being interred. The emotional impact of such a discovery is undeniable. To encounter human remains separated in this way is to confront the realities of ancient warfare beyond romanticised narratives. Yet it also reveals something about order and system. The act was not chaotic, it was ritualised, controlled, integrated into state structure. The severed hands of Avaris mark one of the earliest physical confirmations of a practice long described in texts, but rarely evidenced archaeologically. They connect written history with material reality. They show that even in periods of political fragmentation, administrative systems operated with precision. The Hyksos period eventually ended when native Egyptian rulers from Thebes rose against foreign control, culminating in the reunification of Egypt under Ahmose I and the beginning of the New Kingdom. But Avaris remained in memory as a place of power and transition. In the stillness of the Nile Delta, where water channels reflect sunlight and fertile fields surround ancient ruins, the buried hands of Avaris rest once more beneath the soil. They are not symbols carved in stone. They are fragments of a moment, a battlefield concluded, a ceremony completed, a reward granted. And through them we glimpse not only the violence of ancient war, but the structure and ritual that shaped how power was measured, counted, and remembered in one of Egypt's most complex eras. The construction crew that found a Viking ship. In southeastern Norway, in a quiet farming region not far from the town of Halden, a routine infrastructure survey revealed something unexpected beneath layers of clay and soil. The land appeared ordinary from the surface. Open fields, gentle slopes, and the steady rhythm of modern agricultural life. There were no visible mounds rising dramatically from the ground, no obvious signs that anything ancient lay hidden beneath. But when ground-penetrating radar equipment scanned the field in 2018, the image that appeared on the screen was unmistakable. A ship, long, curved, perfectly outlined beneath the earth. This was the discovery of the Gjellestad ship, one of the most significant Viking finds in recent decades. The site at Gjellestad had already drawn archaeological interest because of faint traces of burial mounds visible in historical records and aerial photography. Many large Viking mounds in Norway were flattened centuries ago to create farmland, leaving only subtle variations in soil colour and elevation. As part of a cultural heritage assessment before construction work, archaeologists conducted non-invasive surveys using advanced radar technology. The radar images revealed not just one anomaly, but an entire burial complex. At its centre lay the clear outline of a Viking longship, approximately 20 metres in length, buried within what had once been a monumental mound. Unlike earlier discoveries such as the Oseberg ship or the Gokstad ship, which were excavated in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, the Gjellestad ship was first identified digitally, its form emerging not from spades, but from reflected radar signals mapping density differences beneath the soil. The outline showed the curved bow and stern typical of Viking ship design. The keel line was visible, the shape was symmetrical. It was not a natural formation, it was intentional. Viking ship burials were reserved for individuals of high status. In Scandinavia during the 8th to 10th centuries, ships symbolised power, mobility, and identity. They were not only vessels of trade and warfare, but representations of prestige and cosmic journey. To bury a person within a ship was to prepare them for travel into the afterlife. The Gjellestad ship likely dates to around 800 CE, placing it in the early Viking Age. Although the mound that once covered it had been levelled over time, traces of the surrounding burial landscape remained detectable through geophysical survey. Archaeologists faced an urgent challenge. Preliminary scans suggested that the wooden remains were deteriorating rapidly due to fungal activity and changing groundwater conditions. Unlike the Oseberg and Gokstad ships, which had been preserved in clay-rich soils with favourable moisture balance, the Gjellestad ship appeared fragile. In 2020, after careful planning, a full excavation began. What emerged confirmed the radar's promise. The keel of the ship survived, though much of the upper wood had decayed. Iron rivets marking the planks were found in alignment, outlining the original hull structure. The burial chamber within the ship had collapsed over time, but its footprint was still visible. The site was not isolated. Radar surveys revealed additional large burial mounds and structures nearby, suggesting that Gjellerstad was part of a broader elite cemetery landscape. The presence of a ship burial within such a complex reinforces the idea that this was a centre of regional authority during the Viking Age. The Viking longship was more than transportation. It was technology refined over generations, built with overlapping planks in clinker construction, secured by iron rivets, and designed for both open sea voyages and shallow river navigation. These ships enabled Scandinavian expansion across Europe. They carried traders to Byzantium, raiders to England, settlers to Iceland and Greenland, and occasionally they carried the dead into burial. The Gjellerstad ship may have belonged to a chieftain or local ruler, someone whose identity commanded respect. Ship burials required immense resources. Constructing a longship demanded skilled craftsmanship and significant timber. To inter it permanently in the ground signified wealth and power. Unlike mythological tales of flaming ship funerals set adrift at sea, archaeological evidence shows that most Viking ship burials occurred on land, within mounds that marked territory and lineage. The mound itself would have been visible from afar, rising above surrounding fields as a statement of presence. Over centuries, agricultural activity flattened many such mounds. The Gjellerstad mound gradually disappeared into farmland, its shape absorbed into the landscape, and yet, beneath that ordinary field, the ship remained. The discovery highlights the role of modern technology in archaeology. Ground-penetrating radar allows researchers to detect anomalies without disturbing the soil. In this case, it revealed a complete burial structure before excavation began. The image of the Gjellerstad ship, its outline glowing against darker earth in radar scans, carries a quiet power. It is a reminder that history does not always reveal itself through visible ruins. Sometimes it waits just below the surface. The excavation process required meticulous care. Fragile organic remains were stabilized with conservation materials. Soil samples were collected for environmental analysis. Every rivet, every fragment of wood, every discoloration in the soil was documented. Although the upper hull had largely decomposed, the surviving keel and rivet pattern allow researchers to reconstruct the ship's dimensions and likely appearance. Standing at the excavation site, one does not see towering masts or carved dragon heads. One sees soil cut open carefully, lines of iron rivets tracing an ancient curve, and beneath the open Norwegian sky a shape that once moved across water now rests in earth. The construction crew that found a Viking ship did not strike wood with a shovel in dramatic fashion. Instead, the discovery unfolded quietly through survey and imaging, through signals reflecting off buried structure. Yet the result carries equal impact. The Gjellerstad ship expands understanding of Viking burial practices and regional power networks. It confirms that elite maritime symbolism extended across southeastern Norway, and that undiscovered ship burials may still lie hidden beneath fields. In the calm landscape of Norway, where forests meet farmland and modern roads cross ancient ground, the past remains close. The Viking Age was not only about raids and conquest, it was about community, identity, craftsmanship, and ritual, and beneath clay and grass, a longship waited more than 1,000 years to be seen again. Its wood may have faded, its sails long gone, but its outline remains, a quiet arc beneath the soil, marking the place where water once shaped a people, and where a construction survey revealed that even the most ordinary ground can hold extraordinary stories. The child who found a mammoth bone hut. In 1965, in a small village in central Ukraine, a young boy was helping his father dig a cellar for storage near their home. The soil was dense and cold, layered with centuries of quiet history. As they dug deeper, the shovel struck something solid. It was not stone, it was bone, large, curved, unmistakably ancient. What the family had uncovered would soon become one of the most extraordinary Ice Age discoveries in Europe, a dwelling built from the bones of mammoths. The site is known as Medjurik, located near the Dnieper River. At first glance, it appears like ordinary farmland. There are no towering ruins or dramatic cliffs, but beneath the earth lay evidence of human life from nearly 15,000 years ago, during the Upper Paleolithic period, when much of Europe was still shaped by the final stages of the last ice age. Archaeologists quickly arrived after the discovery and began careful excavation. What they uncovered was not a scattered pile of bones, but a deliberate circular structure composed of mammoth skulls, jawbones, tusks, and long limb bones arranged in a defined pattern. It was architecture. The Medjurik structure measures roughly 5 meters in diameter. Its walls were formed by stacking mammoth skulls at the base, reinforced with additional bones placed vertically and horizontally to create a stable frame. The bones were not randomly placed, they were arranged with intention, forming a circular boundary. Inside the structure, researchers found evidence of hearths, areas where fire had once burned, along with stone tools, animal remains, and small ivory artifacts. This was not a grave, it was a home. During the Ice Age, timber was scarce across the Ukrainian plains. The environment was cold and open, dominated by steppe tundra vegetation rather than dense forest. Mammoths roamed these landscapes in herds, providing not only meat but also hide, fat, and bone. Bone in this context was a resource. Large mammoth bones were strong and durable. When arranged carefully, they could form the structural base of a shelter. Animal hides likely covered the upper framework, creating insulation against freezing winds. The Medjurik site eventually revealed not just one dwelling, but 4 mammoth bone houses clustered together. This suggests that a small community lived there, returning seasonally or perhaps occupying the site for extended periods. Radiocarbon dating places the settlement around 14,000 to 15,000 years ago, near the end of the last glacial maximum. The climate was harsh. Survival required cooperation and adaptation. The construction of a bone house required effort and planning. A single mammoth skeleton could provide enough material for part of a dwelling, but the Medjurik structures incorporated bones from multiple animals. Archaeologists estimate that the remains of dozens of mammoths were used across the site. Some may have been hunted directly. Others may have been scavenged from natural deaths. The circular design is significant. Circular shelters distribute wind pressure more evenly and retain heat efficiently. The mammoth skulls placed at the base created a solid perimeter. Long bones functioned like beams. Tusks may have helped support upper coverings. Inside the dwellings, archaeologists found decorated ivory objects, small engravings that suggest symbolic or artistic expression. One artifact appears to be a primitive map etched onto mammoth tusk, possibly representing the surrounding landscape. This detail shifts our understanding of the people who built these homes. They were not merely surviving, they were observing, representing, thinking abstractly. The child who struck bone in 1965 could not have known he was uncovering Ice Age architecture. Yet his discovery revealed something profound. Humans were capable of engineering stable, insulated dwellings in one of the harshest climates on Earth long before agriculture, cities, or metal tools. Medjurik challenges the image of Paleolithic humans as constantly wandering without permanent structure. While they were hunter-gatherers, sites like this suggest repeated occupation and architectural knowledge. The placement of hearths inside the dwellings indicates organised interior space. Ash deposits reveal sustained fire use. Burned bone fragments show that mammoth fat and marrow were utilised as fuel. Outside the dwellings, refuse areas contain evidence of tool production and butchering. This was a functioning settlement. The landscape around Mezherich during the Ice Age would have been vast and open. Snow covered the ground for much of the year. Temperatures dropped far below freezing. In such conditions, shelter meant survival. Standing at the reconstructed site today, one can see a replica of the mammoth bone hut, curved skulls forming a ring, tusks arching upward, hides imagined overhead. It feels both primitive and ingenious. The child who found a mammoth bone hut revealed more than a structure. He revealed resilience. The Mezherich dwellings remind us that human innovation did not begin with civilization in the modern sense. It began with adaptation to environment, with the ability to look at available materials, even the bones of massive Ice Age animals, and transform them into protection. These houses stood against Ice Age winds. They sheltered families. They held firelight against the cold, and for thousands of years they remained buried beneath Ukrainian soil, preserved by sediment and time. In the quiet fields near the Dnieper River, where modern life continues above ancient ground, the story of Mezherich rests in layers below. A child's shovel uncovered a doorway into prehistory, and beneath the earth, arranged in a circle of bone, stands evidence that even in the coldest chapters of human history, people built warmth from what the world gave them, shaping survival into shelter. With deliberate hands and enduring imagination, Archaeological, one of the world's first neighbourhoods. In the dry plains of central Anatolia, not far from the Melendiz River in modern-day Turkey, there rises a low, unassuming mound of earth. From a distance, it appears no different from the many natural hills scattered across the landscape. There are no towering walls, no carved statues, no dramatic stone monuments announcing its importance. Yet beneath that mound lies one of the earliest known experiments in settled human life. This is Archaeological, dating back nearly 10,000 years to around 8,200 BCE. Archaeological belongs to the pre-pottery Neolithic period, a time before ceramics, before metal tools, and long before written language. It represents one of the earliest large-scale sedentary communities known in Anatolia, and offers a rare window into the moment when humanity began shifting from mobile hunter-gatherer bands toward permanent settlement. The site was first excavated in the 1960s, but more systematic research began in the late 1980s and continues today. As archaeologists peeled back layers of soil, they uncovered densely packed mud brick houses arranged closely together, forming what can only be described as an early neighbourhood. The homes were rectangular and built with sun-dried mud bricks placed atop stone foundations. They shared walls with neighbouring structures, creating a continuous block of architecture without streets in the modern sense. Entry into these houses was not from ground-level doors, but from the roof. Ladders would have led down into interior living spaces. This rooftop access suggests a unique form of communal design. The roofs themselves functioned as shared pathways, connecting one household to another. Inside the houses, archaeologists discovered hearths, storage pits, grinding stones, and simple platforms used for sleeping or working. The spaces were modest but carefully organised. Over time, old houses were demolished and rebuilt directly, atop previous ones, gradually raising the mound higher as generations layered their lives into the same footprint. The continuity of rebuilding reveals something significant. These people were not passing through, they were staying. Archaeological stands at a turning point in human history, the transition from mobility to permanence. For tens of thousands of years, humans had lived in temporary camps, moving with seasons and animal migrations. But here, along the banks of a river in Anatolia, people began anchoring themselves to one place. Archaeological evidence suggests that the inhabitants relied on a mixed economy. They hunted wild sheep and goats while gradually experimenting with early forms of domestication. Over time, skeletal changes in animal remains indicate that certain species were being managed and controlled rather than simply hunted. This slow shift toward animal domestication marks one of the earliest steps toward agriculture. Plant remains found at a site show that wild grains were collected and processed. Grinding stones used to crush seeds have been recovered in abundance, suggesting a growing reliance on plant foods. The settlement was not yet fully agricultural, but it was moving in that direction. Another striking feature of Archaeological is its burial practice. Many individuals were interred beneath the floors of their homes. After a person died, their body was buried within the domestic space, sometimes beneath sleeping platforms or near hearths. This suggests a deep connection between the living and the dead. The home was not just a shelter, it was an ancestral space. Burial beneath the floor reinforced continuity across generations. The same house might hold multiple burials over time, binding family identity to a fixed location. Skeletal analysis also reveals signs of physical strain and injury. Some individuals show healed fractures, indicating survival after trauma. Others exhibit cranial modifications, intentional shaping of the skull, possibly reflecting social or cultural practices. One particularly significant discovery at Archaeological involves evidence of early brain surgery, a skull bearing signs of trepanation. The deliberate drilling or scraping of a hole into the skull was found at the site. The bone shows signs of healing, meaning the individual survived the procedure. This suggests medical experimentation or ritual practice nearly 10,000 years ago. Life in Archaeological would have been demanding. Mud brick walls required maintenance. Hearth smoke filled enclosed spaces. Water had to be carried from nearby sources. Food processing consumed hours each day. Yet the settlement endured for nearly 1,000 years. Its longevity suggests stability. The clustered architecture reflects cooperation. Shared walls conserved building materials and likely helped insulate interiors against Anatolia's harsh winters and hot summers. Over time, Archaeological expanded and evolved. Eventually, other settlements in the region, including the more famous Çatalhöyük, would continue this trajectory of dense urban-style living. But Archaeological stands earlier in that chain. It is among the first. The landscape around the site today appears open and quiet, with rolling plains stretching under wide skies. Standing atop the mound, one sees little that hints at the dense human activity once present, but beneath that surface lies the layered story of a community testing permanence, testing cooperation, testing the idea of living side by side, year after year. The importance of Archaeological is not found in monumental architecture or grand temples. It is found in walls shared between neighbours, in burials beneath floors, in the gradual domestication of animals, and in the decision to remain. This was not yet a city, but it was no longer temporary. It was a neighbourhood, a place where roofs connected households and ancestry rooted families to soil. Nearly 10,000 years ago, long before written records or organised states, people here began redefining what it meant to belong to a place. And beneath the quiet Anatolian sky, where wind moves gently across the plains, Archaeological remains, a low mound of earth holding the earliest chapters of settled human life, where the idea of home became something built not for a season, but for generations. The stone towers of Nuraga Santu Antine, in the rolling countryside of northern Sardinia, where fields stretch toward distant hills and the Mediterranean light casts long golden shadows across stone and grass. A massive prehistoric tower rises from the earth. Its dark basalt walls stand firm against wind and time, layered in carefully placed blocks without mortar, forming one of the most impressive structures of Bronze Age Europe. This is Nuraghe Santu Antine, built more than 3,000 years ago, likely around the 16th century BCE. Nuraghe Santu Antine belongs to a mysterious architectural tradition unique to the island of Sardinia. These stone towers, known as nuraghi, dot the Sardinian landscape by the thousands, yet Santu Antine stands among the largest and most complex ever constructed. From a distance, the tower appears almost like a truncated cone rising from the plains. Its stones are enormous, some weighing several tons, stacked with precision and inward curvature, so that the structure narrows gradually toward the top. The engineering is striking, especially considering it was built without cement or metal reinforcement. The people who built it are known as the Nuragic civilization, a Bronze Age culture that flourished on Sardinia from roughly 1800 BCE until the island gradually came under influence from Phoenicians and later Romans. The Nuragic people left no written language that has survived, no long inscriptions explaining their intentions. Instead, they left stone, thousands of towers, each one slightly different, each one silent. Nuraghe Santu Antine is not just a single tower, it is a complex. At its centre rises a main keep, once perhaps over 20 metres tall. Surrounding it are three secondary towers connected by thick curtain walls, forming a triangular bastion. Within the structure are narrow staircases built inside the thickness of the walls, leading upward through multiple levels. Walking inside today, one steps into cool stone corridors where light filters through small openings. The interior chambers are circular, capped with corbelled domes created by stacking stones gradually inward until they meet overhead. This technique forms a beehive-shaped ceiling, stable and enduring. The precision of the corbelling suggests skilled architectural knowledge. The walls are not rough piles of stone. They are measured, deliberate, engineered. The purpose of nuraghi has long been debated. Some scholars interpret them as defensive fortresses, built to protect communities in times of conflict. Others suggest they functioned as elite residences, symbols of power and status for tribal leaders. Still others propose ceremonial or religious functions, pointing to the central placement of certain nuraghi within settlements. Santu Antine's scale supports the idea that it was more than a simple watchtower. The surrounding village, traces of which have been excavated nearby, indicates a community lived in its shadow. Stone huts once clustered around the fortress, forming a settlement pattern centred on the towering structure. The name Santu Antine comes from St. Constantine, reflecting later medieval associations layered onto much older foundations. But long before Christian influence reached Sardinia, this tower dominated the landscape as a statement of presence. The island's geography played a role in shaping nuragic architecture. Sardinia's rugged terrain and mineral wealth made it a strategic location during the Bronze Age. The Nuragic civilization engaged in trade across the Mediterranean, exchanging metals and goods with Mycenaean Greece and other coastal cultures. Bronze artifacts found on the island suggest advanced metallurgical skill. Small bronze figurines, known as bronzetti, depict warriors, boats, and animals, offering glimpses into Nuragic society. The towers themselves may have functioned as landmarks for travellers or traders arriving by sea. Rising above the plains, they would have been visible from considerable distances. Inside Nuraghe Santu Antine, one can climb the ancient staircases that spiral upward within the wall's thickness. Each step is worn smooth by centuries. The narrow passageways feel intimate, almost secretive, yet they reveal the intelligence behind the design. The builders understood load distribution and balance, creating a structure that has withstood millennia of earthquakes and weathering. The basalt stones used in construction were quarried locally. Transporting and positioning them would have required coordination and communal labour. This was not the work of a small family group. It reflects organised society. At sunset, Drone images revealed a full geometry of Santu Antine from above. The triangular outer walls enclose the central keep like protective arms. The symmetry is subtle but intentional. It feels less like random accumulation and more like architectural expression, unlike Egyptian pyramids or Mesopotamian ziggurats. The nuraghi do not carry inscriptions naming kings or deities. Their builders remain anonymous. That anonymity deepens the mystery. The Nuragic civilization thrived for centuries before gradually transforming under external influence. By the first millennium BCE, Phoenician traders established coastal settlements on Sardinia, bringing new cultural dynamics. Later, Roman rule integrated the island into a wider imperial network, yet the nuraghi remained. Stone does not yield easily to history. Today, more than 7,000 nuraghi are scattered across Sardinia, though many are partially collapsed. Santu Antine stands among the best preserved and most monumental. Standing at its base, one feels scale, not through overwhelming height, but through solidity. The stones are massive, the walls thick, the entrance narrow and controlled. It invites curiosity rather than intimidation. The stone towers of Nuraghe Santu Antine are not monuments to empire in their conventional sense. They are expressions of a society rooted in place, in stone, in island identity. They suggest hierarchy, defence, community, and perhaps ritual, yet they resist definitive interpretation, and perhaps that is their enduring power. In the quiet Sardinian countryside, where wind moves through grasses and distant hills fade into Mediterranean haze, the tower stands much as it did 3,000 years ago, no longer guarded, no longer inhabited, but still upright, still deliberate, still holding within its basalt walls the memory of a civilization that chose to build upward from the earth, shaping stone into permanence beneath the wide island sky. The lost city of Merv. In the vast desert plains of southeastern Turkmenistan, where the Karakum Desert stretches outward in quiet waves of sand and wind, the ruins of an ancient metropolis lie spread across the landscape. From the air, the outlines of massive walls, circular fortresses, and crumbling palaces become visible, a city layered upon itself across millennia. This is Merv, or more precisely, the archaeological complex known today as Merv, once one of the greatest cities of the ancient world. At its height, Merv was not a single city, but a succession of cities built one beside the other, each expanding beyond the previous walls. For more than 2,000 years, Merv stood as a vital crossroads along the Silk Road, connecting East and West, Persia and China, the Mediterranean and Central Asia. Caravans once arrived here heavy with silk, spices, precious stones and manuscripts. Scholars walked its streets, armies passed through its gates, and for a time it may have been the largest city on earth. The story of Merv begins long before the Islamic Golden Age, long before the Mongol invasions that would later devastate it. The earliest settlement, known as Archaeological, dates back to the Achaemenid Persian period, around the 6th century BCE. Its circular mud brick walls still stand in partial form, rising above the desert like a quiet sentinel of antiquity. Archaeological was fortified, compact, and strategic. It controlled water drawn from the Murghab River oasis, a rare source of life in an otherwise arid region. Water meant agriculture. Agriculture meant permanence. Over time, as empires rose and fell, new cities were built adjacent to the old. The Seleucids, successors to Alexander the Great, expanded the settlement into a larger city known as Antiochia Margiana. Later, under the Parthians and Sasanian Persians, Merv continued to grow. By the 8th and 9th centuries CE, during the Abbasid Caliphate, Merv entered a golden era. It became a centre of Islamic scholarship, theology, and science. Libraries flourished, mosques and markets filled the city. Under the Seljuk Empire in the 11th and 12th centuries, Merv reached extraordinary scale. Contemporary accounts describe it as a city of immense size, with bustling bazaars and grand palaces. Some historians estimate its population may have exceeded 500,000 inhabitants. Standing today near the mausoleum of Sultan Sanjar, the most prominent surviving monument at Merv, one can still sense that former grandeur. The mausoleum's massive brick dome rises from the desert floor, its turquoise-tiled interior once gleaming beneath sunlight filtering through geometric windows. Sultan Sanjar ruled the Seljuk Empire at its height. His tomb reflects architectural ambition and artistic refinement, even in its weathered state. Yet the lost city of Merv is defined as much by destruction as by prosperity. In 1221, the Mongol army led by Tolui, son of Genghis Khan, reached Merv. Historical chronicles describe a massacre of staggering scale. After a siege, the city fell. According to medieval accounts, hundreds of thousands of inhabitants were killed. While such numbers may be exaggerated, archaeological evidence confirms that Merv never fully recovered from the Mongol invasion. The once vibrant metropolis gradually declined, its walls eroding into the desert. What remains today is not a single ruin, but an immense archaeological landscape covering multiple walled cities. Kala, Gyar Kala, Sultan Kala, each marking a different historical layer. Walking across the site feels like moving through time rather than space. The mud brick ramparts of Gyar Kala stretch long and linear, enclosing what was once a dense urban core. Towers punctuate the walls at regular intervals. The desert wind moves through open gates where caravans once passed. Mud brick architecture dominates the remains. Unlike stone-built cities, Merv's structures were primarily constructed from baked and sun-dried bricks. This material was practical in a region where stone was scarce, yet it also made the city vulnerable to erosion once abandoned. Rain and wind gradually softened edges. Walls slumped. Palaces collapsed into low mounds. And yet, from the air, the geometric precision remains striking. Drone imagery reveals the vast scale of Sultan Kala's enclosure. The outer walls form a near rectangular boundary stretching over several kilometres. Within, faint traces of streets and foundations hint at neighbourhoods long vanished. The great Kiz Kala, a fortress-like structure with fluted mud brick walls, stands partially intact. Its rhythmic vertical ridges create a pattern of light and shadow across its facade. The function of Kiz Kala remains debated. Possibly a palace, possibly an elite residence. Merv's importance lay in its position along the Silk Road. It served as a meeting point between cultures, languages and religions. Zoroastrian temples once stood here. Later, Islamic institutions thrived. Buddhist and Nestorian Christian influences passed through as well, and it was a city of exchange, of adaptation, of continuity through changing empires. Archaeologists continue to excavate portions of Merv, uncovering ceramics, coins, manuscripts, and fragments of daily life. Each artifact adds texture to a city once filled with voices, but silence now dominates. The Karakum Desert reclaims what it can. Sand drifts against walls. Grass grows in sheltered corners. At sunset the ruins glow amber under low light, their outlines softened yet unmistakable. The lost city of Merv reminds us that urban greatness is not permanent. It rises through geography and trade, through political stability and cultural openness, and it falls through conquest, environmental strain, and shifting routes of commerce. Today, Merv is recognised as a UNESCO World Heritage Site, protected as one of the best preserved examples of a Silk Road metropolis. Yet protection does not restore population, it preserves memory. Standing at the edge of Sultan Kala's walls, Looking across kilometres of open earth where houses once stood shoulder to shoulder, one senses the scale not through height, but through breadth. Merv was expansive, layered, ambitious. It connected worlds, and now it rests. In the stillness of Turkmenistan's desert, where wind moves gently across ancient mud brick and the horizon stretches uninterrupted in every direction, the lost city of Merv remains, a vast imprint of human aspiration and vulnerability, a reminder that even the greatest cities can fade into earth, leaving behind only walls, silence, and the faint geometry of what once was one of the largest cities the world had ever known. The Pyramid of Hellinikon. In the countryside of the Argolis region of southern Greece, surrounded by olive groves and low hills shaped by centuries of quiet rural life, there stands a small stone structure that has sparked debate far beyond its modest size. It does not dominate the landscape like the pyramids of Egypt. It is not perfectly pointed, nor does it rise dramatically toward the sky. Yet its shape is unmistakable. Slanted walls, narrow entrance, stone blocks carefully arranged. This is the Pyramid of Hellinikon, located near the village of Hellinikon in the Peloponnese. The structure measures roughly 10 by 12 metres at its base. Its walls incline inward, giving it a pyramidal silhouette, though its top is no longer intact. Built from large limestone blocks fitted together without mortar, it presents a simplicity that invites interpretation. The Pyramid of Hellinikon has long stood at the centre of a historical question. What exactly was it, and when was it built? Ancient Greek historian Pausanias, writing in the 2nd century CE, described a pyramid-like structure in the Argolis region, which he associated with a tomb for soldiers who had fallen in battle. Some scholars have connected his account to Hellinikon, though whether he referred to this exact structure remains uncertain. The debate intensified in the late 20th century when thermoluminescence dating tests suggested the possibility that parts of the structure might date as early as the 3rd millennium BCE, potentially making it contemporaneous with the Egyptian pyramids. That claim, if accurate, would dramatically reshape understanding of early Greek architecture. However, subsequent research has largely placed the construction in the classical period, around the 4th century BCE. Most archaeologists today interpret the structure not as a prehistoric pyramid, but as a fortified tower or guard post, likely part of a network of small defensive structures along important travel routes in ancient Argolis. His location supports this interpretation. The site lies near an ancient road connecting Argos to Tegea, a route that would have required monitoring and protection during periods of conflict between city-states. The structure's interior layout suggests functionality rather than monumentality. A narrow entrance leads into a small chamber, with evidence that an upper level may once have existed. The thick walls and sloped exterior would have provided structural stability and defensive advantage. From inside, the space feels enclosed and utilitarian, not ceremonial, not grand, and yet the pyramidal form distinguishes it from typical rectangular Greek towers. The sloping walls remain the key feature that fuels curiosity. Why adopt a pyramidal shape in a region otherwise known for temples, theatres and columned architecture? Some proposed that the inward-leaning walls improved structural strength. Others suggest aesthetic influence or experimentation in design. There is no evidence of internal burial chambers, elaborate passages, or inscriptions linking it to royal commemoration. Unlike Egyptian pyramids, which were monumental tombs built on vast scales, Hellinikon is modest and practical. Still, its silhouette has encouraged speculation for generations. In the 19th and early 20th centuries, European scholars were fascinated by the idea of ancient connections between civilizations. The notion that Greece might have possessed pyramids older than Egypt appealed to nationalist narratives and romantic imagination. Modern archaeology, however, relies on stratigraphy, pottery analysis, and architectural comparison rather than visual resemblance alone, excavations at Hellinikon have uncovered pottery fragments and construction techniques consistent with the classical era, aligning it more closely with defensive outposts than prehistoric monuments. The limestone blocks used in construction were locally sourced. Their placement suggests skilled masonry, though not on the scale of monumental state-sponsored building projects. The Pyramid of Hellinikon stands today partially restored, its walls rising only several meters high. The top is open to the sky, and its once sharp edges have softened over centuries. Standing before it, one does not feel dwarfed. One feels curious. It is not overwhelming. It is intriguing. The surrounding landscape is peaceful. Olive trees cast thin shadows. The distant hills of Argolis roll gently toward the horizon. It is difficult to imagine soldiers once guarding the road, watching for movement in the valley below. The structure's endurance speaks to its solid engineering. Despite earthquakes and weathering, its core remains intact. If it served as a watchtower, it functioned well. If it served as a tomb, its contents have long vanished. The broader question the Pyramid of Hellinikon raises is not whether Greece built pyramids like Egypt, but how architectural forms evolve and reappear across cultures for practical reasons. Sloped walls distribute weight efficiently. Thick stone resists attack. Geometry repeats when it works. In that sense, the pyramid shape may be less about imitation and more about structural logic. Yet the romance persists. Visitors still refer to it as a pyramid. Photographs from certain angles emphasize its triangular profile. Drone images reveal its footprints set quietly within the rural terrain. The Pyramid of Hellinikon reminds us how easily form can shape narrative. A structure does not need to be enormous to inspire speculation. Its proportions alone can ignite centuries of debate. In the end, it stands as a small but compelling fragment of ancient Greece, a stone building that bridges practicality and mystery. Whether guard tower or tomb, classical fortification or something slightly older, it reflects a society attentive to defence, movement and landscape. And beneath the Mediterranean sky, where sunlight warms, limestone walls and the air carries the scent of olive groves, the Pyramid of Hellinikon remains, not a monument of vast empire, but a quiet geometric anomaly in the Greek countryside, holding within its sloped stones the subtle tension between archaeology and imagination. The megalithic temple of Gantija. On the small island of Gozo, just northwest of mainland Malta, two massive stone structures rise from a gentle plateau overlooking the Mediterranean landscape. From a distance, they appear almost organic, their curved walls blending into the terrain as if grown rather than built. But as one approaches, the scale becomes undeniable. Gigantic limestone blocks, some weighing more than 50 tons, stand upright in carefully arranged formations. This is Gantija, one of the oldest freestanding monumental temple complexes in the world. The site belongs to the Gantija Temples, part of the broader megalithic temples of Malta, a UNESCO World Heritage Site recognised for its extraordinary antiquity. Radiocarbon dating places the construction of Gantija between 3600 and 3200 BCE, making it older than Stonehenge and even older than the pyramids of Giza. Its name comes from the Maltese word Gant, meaning giant. Local legend once claimed that the temple was built by a giantess who carried the massive stones on her head while nursing her child. The scale of the megaliths made such stories understandable. In a time before cranes, metal tools, or wheeled transport, the effort required to move and position these blocks remains impressive even by modern standards. Yet Gantija was not the work of giants. It was the achievement of a Neolithic island community whose engineering and symbolic vision shaped stone into sacred space. The temple complex consists of two adjacent structures sharing a boundary wall but functioning as separate units. Each temple is built in a cloverleaf plan, with multiple apses radiating from a central corridor. The layout is deliberate and symmetrical, suggesting careful architectural planning rather than spontaneous construction. The outer walls are constructed from enormous limestone blocks, set upright in a technique known as orthostatic construction. The interior walls are made of smaller stones and rubble, carefully packed to stabilize the massive exterior facade. Inside, the space feels enclosed and intimate. The apses curve inward, forming chambers that may have held altars, ritual objects, or offerings. Archaeological excavations have uncovered evidence of animal sacrifice, including bone remains and fragments of pottery decorated with geometric designs. The builders of Gantija belonged to Malta's Temple period culture, a society that flourished on the islands for more than 1,000 years. They left behind multiple temple sites across Malta and Gozo, each with distinctive features but sharing core architectural principles. These temples were not fortresses or dwellings. They were ceremonial spaces. The exact religious beliefs of the Temple period people remain unknown, as they left no written language. However, figurines discovered at Gantija and other Maltese temples often depict corpulent female forms, sometimes interpreted as fertility goddesses or representations of abundance. The agricultural basis of their society likely shaped their spiritual worldview. Living on a relatively small island, dependent on seasonal cycles and limited resources, the community would have been deeply attuned to fertility of land, animals, and people. The orientation of Gantija also suggests astronomical awareness. Some researchers propose that its entrance aligns with specific solar events, such as the rising sun during certain times of year. While not as precisely aligned as later monuments, the orientation hints at attention to celestial patterns. Constructing Gantija required coordinated labour and social organisation, quarrying limestone from local sources, transporting it across uneven terrain, and raising it into position demanded teamwork and planning. Without metal tools, the builders likely used stone implements and wooden rollers or sledges. The scale of the outer walls suggests they were designed to impress. Approaching the Faisal entrance, one passes between towering stone uprights that frame the sky beyond. The threshold marks transition from open landscape into sacred interior. Within the chambers, the sound shifts, wind fades, stone absorbs echo. The atmosphere becomes still. Archaeological layers indicate that Gantija was used and modified over generations. Additions were made, repairs conducted, and ritual deposits left behind. This was not a single event construction, but a living ceremonial centre. Eventually, around 2500 BCE, the Temple period culture on Malta declined and disappeared. The reasons remain uncertain. Environmental strain, soil depletion, and social change are possible factors. The temples were abandoned. For thousands of years they stood exposed to weather and erosion. Later civilizations on Malta, including Phoenicians and Romans, left their own marks on the islands, but Gantija remained largely undisturbed. Modern excavation began in the 19th century, and restoration efforts have since stabilized portions of the structure. Today, visitors can walk through the site, tracing the curved apses and examining the stone textures worn smooth by time. Drone images reveal the full geometry of Gantija from above, the twin cloverleaf forms enclosed within a boundary wall, standing distinct against Gozo's agricultural fields. The megalithic temple of Gantija challenges assumptions about early societies. Its age places it at a formative stage of European prehistory, yet its scale rivals monuments often associated with more centralized states. It was built by a small island community, without empire, without written records, without visible kings, and yet they raised stone in shapes that endure 5,000 years later. The temple does not dominate through height, but through mass and density. Each block anchors the structure firmly into the limestone bedrock of Gozo. Standing inside, looking upward at sky framed by stone uprights, one senses 1. Continuity rather than mystery. Continuity of human intention. Continuity of ritual gathering. Continuity of shaping landscape into meaning. In the quiet Mediterranean light, where the sea glimmers beyond rolling fields and cicadas hum in warm air, Gunteja remains, not as a ruin of empire, but as testimony to one of humanity's earliest architectural traditions, where belief and engineering converged in stone long before the world we know began to take shape. The cliff city of Myra. Along the turquoise coastline of southern Turkey, where the Taurus mountains descend toward the Mediterranean and warm air moves slowly through olive groves and river valleys, a wall of stone rises above the ancient city of Myra. From a distance, the cliff appears natural and unremarkable, shaped by geological time, but as one draws closer, rectangular shapes begin to emerge from the rock face. Doorways, columns, pediments, entire architectural facades carved high into the mountain itself. This is Myra, one of the principal cities of ancient Lycia, and its cliffs hold a city of the dead, suspended above the living. The Lycian civilization flourished in southwestern Anatolia from roughly the 1st millennium BCE until it was gradually absorbed into larger empires, including the Persians, Greeks, and Romans. Though influenced by surrounding cultures, the Lycians retained distinctive traditions, especially in their funerary architecture. Nowhere is that uniqueness more visible than in the rock-cut tombs of Myra. These tombs were not built upon the earth. They were carved directly into vertical limestone cliffs overlooking the city. The facades imitate wooden houses, complete with beams, crossbars, and pitched roof details carefully sculpted into stone. What appears delicate and architectural was in fact chiselled from solid rock. The placement of these tombs high above ground was not accidental. Lycian beliefs held that the soul ascended after death, and elevating burial chambers closer to the sky may have symbolised that journey. The cliffs became both monument and metaphysical bridge. Each tomb facade once sealed a chamber within the mountain. Inside, benches were carved from stone to hold the bodies of the deceased. Many tombs were family vaults, reused over generations. Some are modest in scale, while others are elaborate, featuring detailed relief carvings and inscriptions. From below, the effect is striking. The cliff resembles a vertical neighbourhood, with rows of silent doorways stacked upon one another, forming what appears to be an aerial city carved into the rock. Below these tombs lies the ancient city itself, including one of the best preserved Roman theatres in Anatolia. The Theatre of Myra, constructed during the Roman period, once seated thousands of spectators. Its semicircular tiers and ornate stage building stand in quiet contrast to the rock-cut tombs above. Life and death exist in layered proximity here. The living gathered below. The dead rested above. Myra was an important member of the Lycian League, a confederation of city-states known for its structured and representative political system. Ancient writers admired this league for its balance of power among cities of different sizes. Myra held significant voting weight within that system, reflecting its importance in the region. Over time, Greek language replaced Lycian inscriptions as Hellenistic influence expanded later. Still, under Roman rule, Myra grew in wealth and infrastructure. Roads improved, public buildings expanded, yet the cliff tombs remained untouched. They belonged to an earlier Lycian worldview, preserved even as political control shifted. The engineering behind the tombs required remarkable precision. Workers likely used scaffolding anchored into the rock face. Carving facades high above ground demanded planning and coordination. The limestone cliffs, while workable, required careful shaping to maintain structural stability. The architectural style carved into the stone reflects earlier Lycian wooden construction techniques. The Lycians translated their timber designs into permanent stone forms, preserving the memory of their traditional houses in funerary architecture. The result is both architectural and symbolic continuity. As centuries passed, Myra gained additional historical significance. In the 4th century CE, it became associated with Saint Nicholas, a Christian bishop known for generosity and compassion. The Church of Saint Nicholas still stands near the ancient city, linking Myra to later religious traditions. But long before Christian pilgrimage reached these shores, the cliffs already carried sacred meaning. Standing at the base of the necropolis today, one looks upward at facades weathered by nearly 2.5 millennia. Rain and wind have softened details. Some entrances have collapsed, yet the overall geometry remains clear. At sunset, the stone glows amber. Shadows deepen within carved doorways. The cliff seems to breathe with light and darkness. The cliff city of Myra reflects how ancient societies integrated architecture with landscape. Rather than erecting separate monuments, the Lycians embedded memory into mountains. The cliffs became repositories of lineage and identity. Unlike pyramids rising from open plains, these tombs are inseparable from their environment. They do not stand apart from nature, they become it. Archaeological study continues to examine the inscriptions and burial practices within the tombs, offering insight into Lycian names, titles and social structures. The tombs reveal hierarchy, but also community, as families carved spaces near one another within the same cliff face. The silence within the chambers is profound. No ornament remains, no preserved bodies greet the visitor. Only stone benches and empty interiors remain, shaped by chisels more than 2,000 years ago. The Lycian civilization gradually blended into the larger currents of Mediterranean history. Greek culture influenced language and art. Roman governance reshaped infrastructure. Later Byzantine and Ottoman periods layered new histories onto the region. Yet the cliff tombs endure. They have survived empire. They have survived religious transformation. They have survived time. In the still coastal air of southern Turkey, where mountains rise beyond fertile plains and the Mediterranean glimmers in the distance, the cliff city of Myra remains carved into stone, a vertical testament to a people who look to the cliffs not merely as landscape, but as lasting architecture for eternity, shaping rock into remembrance high above the world they once inhabited. The desert city of Shahri-Sukhteh. In the remote deserts of southeastern Iran, near the border of modern Afghanistan, there lies a vast expanse of sun-baked earth where wind moves freely across open plains. At first glance, the landscape appears empty, flat, silent, and unforgiving. But beneath the dust and scattered mud brick fragments lies one of the earliest great cities of the Bronze Age. This is Shahri-Sukhteh. Its name means the burnt city, and for nearly 1,000 years it stood as one of the most advanced urban settlements in its region. Shahri-Sukhteh was founded around 3200 BCE, during a time when human societies across the world were experimenting with urban life. While Mesopotamia was developing its earliest city-states and the Nile Valley was forming the foundations of pharaonic power, this city rose quietly along the banks of the Helmand River Delta. The environment was different then. Where desert stretches today, there were once wetlands, fertile soils, and seasonal water flow that supported agriculture and livestock. The city grew because water allowed it to grow. Archaeological excavations revealed that Shahri-Sukhteh was carefully organised. It covered more than 150 hectares at its peak. Residential districts were separated from industrial zones. Public spaces were distinct from burial grounds. This was not a loose collection of huts, it was urban planning. Mud brick houses were constructed with multiple rooms, courtyards, and storage areas. Pottery workshops operated in designated sectors. Evidence of textile production, bead making, and metallurgy has been found across the site. Trade connected Shari Sukte to distant cultures. Lapis lazuli from Afghanistan, shells from the Persian Gulf, and ceramics linked to the Indus Valley civilization suggest long-distance exchange networks. The city was not isolated, it was connected. One of the most remarkable discoveries at the site was the world's earliest known artificial eye, found in the burial of a young woman. Crafted from bitumen and gold, it was carefully shaped and placed within the socket. The detail suggests not only technical skill, but a cultural value placed on appearance and identity even in death. Another burial revealed evidence of early brain surgery. A skull bearing signs of trepanation showed healing around the edges of the cut, meaning the individual survived the procedure for some time. These discoveries changed perception. The people of Shari Sukte were not primitive desert dwellers, they were experimenting with medicine, with craftsmanship, with social structure. The cemetery of the city contains thousands of graves. Many include pottery, jewellery, and personal objects placed carefully beside the deceased. Burial customs varied, indicating possible social stratification or evolving traditions over generations. The name Burnt City comes from evidence that parts of the settlement were destroyed by fire multiple times. Layers of ash and charred remains suggest catastrophic events, though whether accidental or deliberate remains uncertain. And yet, after each fire, the city was rebuilt. People returned, they reconstructed, they continued. This resilience allowed Shari Sukte to flourish for nearly a millennium before gradual environmental changes began to alter its fate. The Helmand River shifted its course. Water sources became less reliable, agricultural productivity declined. Urban life in such a fragile ecosystem depended entirely on stability. When that stability weakened, the city slowly emptied. By around 1800 BCE, Shari Sukte was abandoned. Its mud brick walls eroded under desert winds. Roofs collapsed, streets filled with dust. For thousands of years the city rested in silence. Excavations in the 20th century began revealing its scale and complexity. Each trench uncovered more evidence of organisation, artistry and adaptation. Walking across the site, today one sees low walls tracing the outlines of former houses. The desert horizon stretches uninterrupted in every direction. There are no towering monuments here, no pyramids, no ziggurats, just earth shaped carefully by human hands. The desert city of Shari Sukte reminds us that early urban civilization was not limited to the famous river valleys of Egypt and Mesopotamia. In the harsh landscapes of eastern Iran, communities were building, trading, healing, and burying their dead with care long before many later empires emerged. The wind continues to move across the ruins. Sand drifts along ancient foundations, and beneath the open Iranian sky, the burnt city remains, not as a legend, not as a myth, but as quiet evidence that even in desert landscapes, human ambition once shaped a thriving world that rose, endured, and finally returned to dust. The rock city of Petra's little sister. A few kilometres north of the famous rose-red city of Petra, hidden within a narrow sandstone canyon, there is another rock-cut settlement that many visitors overlook. It does not carry the same monumental facade as Al-Khazne. It does not receive the same crowds, yet its silence holds something equally compelling. This is Sikh al-Barid, often called Little Petra, located near the main Nabatean capital of Petra. Sikh al-Barid served as an important suburban and commercial extension of the larger city. Its name means cold canyon. a reference to the shade that lingers between its high sandstone walls. Unlike Petra's dramatic entrance through the long Sick, Little Petra reveals itself more gently, its carved facades emerging gradually as the canyon narrows. The site dates to the Nabatean period, roughly between the 1st century BCE and the 1st century CE. The Nabateans were skilled desert traders who controlled caravan routes connecting Arabia, the Mediterranean, and the Near East. Their wealth came not from conquest, but from commerce, incense, spices, silk, and precious goods passing through their territory. Little Petra appears to have functioned primarily as a caravan station. Archaeologists believe traders may have stopped here before entering Petra itself. The site contains rock-cut chambers, storage rooms, dining areas, and open courtyards that suggest hospitality and commerce rather than royal ceremony. Walking through the narrow canyon today, one sees facades carved directly into soft sandstone cliffs. Some are simple rectangular openings, others feature decorative details, pilasters, stepped motifs, and carved niches. The scale is smaller than Petra's monumental tombs, but the craftsmanship is unmistakable. One of the most remarkable features of Siq al-Barid lies inside a chamber known as the Painted House. On its ceiling are faint but extraordinary frescoes, painted vines, birds, and floral motifs that reflect Hellenistic artistic influence. These are among the only surviving Nabatean paintings in situ. The presence of interior frescoes suggests that some spaces were not merely utilitarian, but refined and ceremonial. Perhaps elite merchants or visiting dignitaries gathered here for feasts before proceeding to the capital. The layout of Little Petra reveals a self-contained community. There are multiple levels connected by carved staircases. Water channels cut into the rock demonstrate Nabatean expertise in hydraulic engineering, allowing them to collect and store rainwater in a region defined by scarcity. Water meant survival, and survival meant mastery of landscape. The Nabateans transformed desert geography into opportunity. They carved cisterns into rock, redirected seasonal floods, and created agricultural terraces where few would expect cultivation. Little Petra reflects that adaptability. It is intimate compared to Petra's grand monuments, yet it feels alive with practical purpose. The carved rooms show signs of everyday use, soot marks from lamps, storage niches, and simple carved benches. Trade caravans arriving from Arabia may have paused here, unloading goods and resting animals in open courtyards before the final journey south into Petra's ceremonial heart. The relationship between Petra and Siq al-Barid mirrors the relationship between capital and suburb. While Petra held royal tombs and monumental facades carved in towering cliffs, Little Petra functioned as an outer settlement, commercial, supportive, essential. Over time, as Roman influence expanded and trade routes shifted, Nabatean independence waned. In 106 CE, the Roman Empire annexed the Nabatean kingdom, integrating it into the province of Arabia Petraea. Petra continued under Roman rule for centuries, but economic shifts gradually diminished its importance. Earthquakes and changing trade patterns led to decline. Little. Petra too was eventually abandoned. Sand drifted through its canyon. Wind carved softly at its facades, and the once busy caravan station returned to silence. Standing inside Siq al-Barid today, one feels enclosure rather than spectacle. The canyon walls rise steeply overhead, filtering sunlight into soft beams. The air is cooler here, protected from the harsh desert glare. It is easy to imagine merchants speaking in multiple languages, discussing routes and prices beneath these cliffs. The rock city of Petra's little sister does not compete with Petra's grandeur. It complements it. It reminds us that great capitals rely on networks of traders, travellers, craftsmen, and support settlements. Little Petra was part of that network. Its smaller scale does not diminish its significance. Instead, it offers intimacy, a closer look at daily Nabatean life. At evening, when shadows stretch long across the canyon floor and the sandstone glows warm orange beneath the Jordanian sky, Sikh al-Barid feels suspended in time. The carved doorways appear almost like windows into another era, an era of caravans and negotiation, of painted ceilings and desert ingenuity. The silence here is different from Petra's vast amphitheatre of cliffs. It is quieter, more personal, and in that quiet canyon north of Petra, where stone holds the memory of trade routes that once connected continents, little Petra remains, carved into rock, shaped by commerce, and preserved by the desert that first inspired its creation. The mountain sanctuary of Nemrut. High in the mountains of southeastern Turkey, where the air thins and the horizon stretches across layered ridges of stone, there is a summit unlike any other in the ancient world. At over 2,000 meters above sea level, colossal stone heads rest in silence, their expressions calm, their gazes fixed towards sunrise and sunset. This is Mount Nemrut, more precisely, Mount Nemrut, a royal sanctuary built in the 1st century BCE by King Antiochus I of Commagene. From a distance, the mountain appears crowned by a massive artificial mound, a tumulus constructed of crushed limestone fragments. Beneath that mound lies the tomb of Antiochus, though its burial chamber has never been definitively located. The mound itself rises nearly 50 meters high, forming a cone that dominates the summit, but it is not the tumulus alone that draws attention. Flanking the eastern and western terraces are rows of seated statues, once towering nearly 8 to 10 meters tall. Today, their bodies remain upright on stone thrones, while their massive heads have toppled forward onto the ground, resting separately at their feet. The effect is surreal. Stone gods sitting upright, stone faces scattered before them. Antiochus I ruled the small Hellenistic kingdom of Commagene, positioned strategically between the Roman and Parthian empires. His realm stood at the crossroads of cultures, Greek, Persian, and Anatolian influences blending into a unique political and religious identity. Mount Nemrut was his statement, his monument, his attempt at immortality. The statues represent a syncretic pantheon, Greek and Persian deities fused into singular forms. Zeus Oromasdes combines the Greek sky god with the Persian Ahura Mazda. Apollo Mithras merges classical and Iranian elements. Heracles Artagnius reflects another cultural blending. Among these divine figures sits Antiochus himself, carved at equal height with the gods. The message was deliberate. He was not merely a ruler, he was divine. The sanctuary was designed for ritual, particularly at sunrise and sunset. On the eastern terrace the statues face the rising sun. On the western terrace they greet the setting light. The alignment reinforces the cosmic symbolism Antiochus sought to embody. Standing at sunrise today, visitors watch as first light touches the stone faces. The expressions remain serene despite centuries of weathering. Wind moves across the summit. The silence feels expansive. The engineering behind Mount Nemrut required immense effort. Transporting and carving limestone blocks at such altitude suggests coordinated labour and royal authority. The terrace platforms were carefully levelled, and relief carvings along the backs of the thrones depict Antiochus shaking hands with the gods, a visual declaration of his divine association. The inscriptions at Nemrut are extensive. Antiochus left behind a lengthy text outlining his lineage and explaining his intention. He traced his ancestry to both Greek and Persian royal lines, asserting legitimacy from multiple traditions. The sanctuary was meant not only as a tomb, but as a statement of unity between East and West. Yet time has reshaped the monument. Earthquakes likely caused the statues' heads to topple. The tumulus has resisted excavation, its loose stone covering shifting under pressure. Despite numerous attempts, the burial chamber of Antiochus remains undiscovered. The mystery of what lies beneath the mound adds quiet intrigue. Archaeologists continue to study the site, analysing inscriptions and architectural alignment. Mount Nemrut is now a UNESCO World Heritage Site, recognised not only for its artistic achievement, but for its cultural synthesis. Unlike Egyptian pyramids or Roman temples, Nemrut exists in isolation. There is no surrounding city, no bustling ruins below, only mountain, sky, stone. At sunset, the western terrace glows in amber light. Shadows stretch long across the fallen heads. The massive eyes, carved from limestone, seem contemplative rather than commanding. The mountain sanctuary of Nemrut reflects the ambition of a ruler seeking permanence in a fragile political landscape. Commagene itself would eventually be absorbed by Rome. Antiochus's kingdom faded, but his mountain remains. The site is not overwhelming through urban scale. It is overwhelming through elevation, through solitude, through the sense that one stands between earth and sky, where a king once imagined himself among gods. In the quiet mountain air of southeastern Turkey, where wind hums softly across the summit and sunrise unfolds slowly across the horizon, the giant statues of Mount Nemrut endure, weathered, fragmented, yet unmistakable, guarding a royal tomb still hidden beneath stone, and preserving in silence the vision of a king who built his sanctuary where the world feels closest to the heavens. The citadel of Caral. In the dry soup valley of coastal Peru, where desert hills rise gently beyond irrigated farmland, and the Pacific Ocean lies not far to the west, there are pyramids that predate the pharaohs of Egypt. They are not built of stone blocks carved into smooth angles. They are not crowned with golden tombs. They are made of earth and stone, rising quietly from the desert floor. This is Caral, more precisely, Caral, the oldest known city in the Americas. Caral flourished around 2600 to 2000 BCE, during a time when large-scale urban societies were just beginning to emerge in other parts of the world. While the pyramids of Giza would not be built for several centuries, and long before the rise of the Inca Empire in Peru, Caral stood as a fully developed urban centre. It is part of what scholars call the Norte Chico civilization, one of the world's earliest independent cradles of civilization. From above, aerial views reveal a carefully organised layout. Large stepped pyramid platforms dominate the centre of the city. Around them are smaller residential areas, plazas, and circular sunken courts. The largest pyramid, known as the Piramide Maya, rises nearly 30 metres high. Wide staircases ascend its face. At the summit, archaeologists discovered rooms likely used for ceremonial gatherings. Caral was not a fortress. It was not a city of war. There is little evidence of weapons or defensive walls. Instead, Caral appears to have been a centre of ritual, administration, and social organisation. The Supi Valley provided fertile land supported by irrigation systems drawing water from the river. Cotton cultivation was particularly important. Cotton was used to produce fishing nets, which supported coastal fisheries, creating an economic partnership between inland agricultural communities and coastal fishing villages. This network sustained population growth, and with growth came coordination, the construction of corrals. Pyramids required organised labour and long-term planning. Stones were gathered and placed within woven reed bags called shikras, which were stacked to form the internal structure of pyramid walls. The technique provided flexibility during earthquakes, allowing the structures to absorb seismic movement rather than collapse. Even 5,000 years later, many of these pyramids still stand. At the centre of several plazas lie sunken circular courts. These spaces, lower than ground level and accessed by staircases, likely served ceremonial functions. Their design creates an intimate gathering area within the larger open plaza. Standing inside one of these courts today, one can see how sound might have carried across the circle, voices rising upward toward the surrounding platforms. Music may have filled these spaces. Archaeologists discovered flutes made from bird bones and deer bones at the site. The instruments suggest that ritual performance was part of life in Corral. The city's layout indicates social hierarchy. Larger structures near the centre likely housed elites or served ceremonial leadership roles, while smaller residential zones spread outward. Yet there is no clear evidence of kings or written records describing rulers. Corral developed without ceramics in its early stages, a fact that distinguishes it from other early civilizations. Instead, woven textiles, baskets, and carved gourds appear frequently in excavations. The absence of visible warfare has drawn attention from researchers. Unlike many ancient cities that show signs of fortification or violent destruction, Corral appears to have developed and declined without large-scale conflict. Its power may have been ideological rather than military, religious authority, economic coordination, shared belief. Over time, climate shifts and environmental stress likely affected the Supi Valley. Changing river patterns and drought conditions would have disrupted agriculture. By around 1800 BCE, Corral was gradually abandoned. The pyramids remained, covered in sand and wind-blown sediment. For centuries, the site was largely unknown beyond local awareness. Modern excavation began in the 20th century, with major research efforts led by Peruvian archaeologist Ruth Shady in the 1990s. As structures were cleared, the scale of Corral became undeniable. It was not an isolated settlement. It was a city. The citadel of Corral reshaped understanding of American prehistory. It demonstrated that complex urban society in the Americas emerged independently, not as a diffusion from elsewhere. Its age rivals the earliest cities of Mesopotamia and Egypt, and yet it remained largely unknown until recent decades. Walking across the site today, one sees broad stepped platforms rising from pale desert soil. The valley stretches green in the distance. The mountains frame the horizon. The air is dry, quiet. The pyramids of Corral do not dominate with sharp geometry. Their surfaces are weathered, softened by time, but their scale remains impressive. They reflect coordination, vision, continuity. The citadel of Corral stands as a reminder that civilization does not begin with conquest or monumental stone alone. It can begin with irrigation canals, shared labour, ritual gathering, and the steady rhythm of agricultural life. 5,000 years ago, in a valley along the Peruvian coast, people organised themselves into something new. They built upward. They gathered in circular plazas. They played music beneath open sky. And beneath the calm desert sun of the Supa Valley, the pyramids of Corral remain, quiet, enduring, and deeply rooted in the earliest chapters of urban life in the Americas. The cliff settlement of Vardzia. In southern Georgia, where rugged mountains rise above the Kura River Valley and the landscape shifts between green slopes and volcanic rock, an entire settlement appears carved into the face of a cliff. From a distance, it looks almost like a honeycomb. Hundreds of openings puncture the rock wall. Balconies, chambers, tunnels. This is Vardzia. More precisely, Vardzia, a vast medieval cave monastery built into the Erusheti mountain during the 12th century. Unlike ancient rock-cut tombs or hidden desert sanctuaries, Vardzia was not constructed in prehistory. It belongs to a specific historical moment, the Golden Age of Georgia, during the reign of King George III and his daughter Queen Tamar. The Kingdom of Georgia at that time was expanding, politically strong, and culturally vibrant, yet it also faced threats from neighbouring powers, particularly the Seljuk Turks. The decision to carve a settlement directly into a cliff was not only spiritual, it was strategic. Vardzia began as a fortified monastery complex. The natural rock face offered protection, concealment, and defensibility. Initially hidden behind the mountain's outer layers, the caves were not fully visible from below. According to historical accounts, an earthquake in 1283 exposed much of the cliff facade, revealing the intricate interior network that had once been concealed. What remains today is astonishing. The complex once included up to 6,000 rooms spread across multiple levels, extending deep into the mountain. These were not random caves, but carefully planned spaces connected by stairways, corridors, and vertical shafts. There were living quarters for monks, storage rooms, wine cellars, refectories, libraries, and at the heart of it all, a church. The Church of the Dormition sits within the cliff's interior, its stone walls adorned with frescoes painted in rich pigments. Among them is a portrait of Queen Tamar herself, depicted with calm authority. The frescoes are not merely decoration, they are testimony to faith, identity, and royal patronage. Vardzia functioned as a monastic centre, but it also had a defensive dimension. Hidden tunnels and escape routes allowed movement within the mountain without exposure. The structure could house hundreds of inhabitants during times of siege. Water was drawn from an elaborate irrigation system that channeled spring water into the complex. Terraced agriculture below supported food production. The monastery was self-sufficient. Standing within one of Vardzia's chambers today, one feels enclosure but not confinement. Light enters through carved windows overlooking the valley. The wind carries sound from the river below. The settlement is both hidden and open, protected and exposed. The architecture follows the natural contours of the volcanic rock. Builders carved directly into soft tough stone, shaping interiors while leaving outer structural support intact. The cliff settlement of Vardzia represents a blending of spiritual retreat and military awareness. The monks who lived here pursued prayer and scholarship, yet they were aware of political reality surrounding them. Queen Tamar's reign marked a high point in Georgian history. Under her leadership, the kingdom expanded and experienced cultural flourishing. Vardzia stands as part of that legacy, a monument not of conquest, but of resilience and devotion. After the devastating earthquake of 1283 exposed much of the structure, Vardzia became more vulnerable. Later invasions, including Mongol incursions, weakened Georgia's stability. Gradually, the monastery declined. Some monks remained, others departed. Over centuries, parts of the complex deteriorated. Rockfalls altered its shape. Yet much of the interior remains accessible today. From above, aerial views reveal the full scale of the cliff face dotted with cave openings. It appears almost architectural in pattern, yet organic in formation. The valley below stretches wide and green. The mountains frame the horizon. Vardzia is not ancient in the Bronze Age sense. It is medieval, yet its integration with landscape feels timeless. It reminds us that architecture does not always rise upward from foundations. Sometimes it recedes inward, shaped from mountain rather than assembled from stone blocks. In the quiet air of southern Georgia, where clouds drift slowly across high ridges and the Kura River winds through the valley, the cliff settlement of Vardzia remains carved into stone, a testament to faith, strategy, and endurance, where human vision transformed a mountain into sanctuary, and where centuries later the chambers still open quietly onto a landscape that has witnessed empire, earthquake, and time itself. The fortress of Khalat al-Bahrain. On the northern coast of the island of Bahrain, where the waters of the Arabian Gulf shimmer under a wide desert sky, a layered mound rises gently from the shoreline. From a distance, it appears to be a single fortification of pale stone, but beneath its walls lies something far older, a sequence of civilizations stacked upon one another for over 4,000 years. This is Qalat al-Bahrain, also known as the Bahrain 4. It stands today as the most visible layer of a much deeper history, the former capital of the ancient civilization of Dilmun. Long before the Portuguese built their 16th century fortress atop this mound, the site had already been inhabited continuously since around 2300 BCE. Archaeologists have uncovered 7 major occupational layers beneath the current fortifications, each representing a different era of settlement. The earliest layers belong to Dilmun, a Bronze Age trading power that thrived between Mesopotamia and the Indus Valley. Ancient Sumerian texts speak of Dilmun as a distant, prosperous land associated with purity and trade. It functioned as a maritime hub, controlling key routes that connected Mesopotamian cities with the rich resources of the Gulf and beyond. Qalat al-Bahrain was its heart. Excavations reveal a carefully planned city, streets, residential quarters, storage areas, and administrative buildings were organised within defensive walls. Warehouses suggest large-scale storage of goods, copper from Oman, timber, precious stones, and possibly even textiles and grain. Water was essential to Dilmun's success. Bahrain's natural freshwater springs, some emerging from beneath the sea, supported agriculture and settlement in an otherwise arid region. Palm groves flourished. Trade ships docked along the coastline, linking the island to distant markets. Over time, Dilmun's power waned. The island came under influence from Kassite Babylon, then Assyrian and later Persian control. Each empire left architectural traces layered into the mound. Above the Bronze Age foundations, Hellenistic and Parthian remains appear, reflecting shifts in political authority and regional exchange. Pottery styles change, construction methods evolve, yet the site remains active. Centuries later, during the Islamic period, Qalat al-Bahrain continued to function as a fortified settlement. Walls were rebuilt, structures adapted. The strategic coastal location ensured ongoing relevance. The most visible structure today, the stone fortress crowning the mound, dates to the Portuguese occupation in the 1500s. Seeking to control Gulf trade routes, Portuguese forces constructed bastions and defensive walls overlooking the sea. From the ramparts, one can still see the horizon stretching outward across calm waters. Standing at the top of the fortress, it is possible to trace time physically beneath one's feet. The uppermost layer belongs to the early, modern period. Beneath it lie Islamic foundations. Beneath those, Hellenistic walls. And further down, the mud brick and stone structures of Dilmun itself. Few places demonstrate urban continuity so clearly. Archaeological excavations at Qalat al-Bahrain have uncovered artifacts spanning millennia, seals inscribed with Dilmun motifs, copper tools, pottery shards, and trade goods linking the island to Mesopotamia and the Indus civilization. The site reveals not a single story, but a sequence: a harbour city of the Bronze Age, a fortified administrative centre, a crossroads of empires, and eventually a colonial stronghold. At sunset, the fort's pale stone glows amber against the Gulf waters. The breeze carries salt and warmth. The surrounding modern city of Manama lies not far away, blending ancient history with contemporary life. The mound beneath the fortress stands approximately 12 metres high, built not by natural formation but by human accumulation, layer upon layer of occupation compacted over centuries. The fortress of Qalat al-Bahrain reminds us that civilizations rarely begin and end in isolation. They overlap, they adapt, they rebuild atop what came before. Dilmun's traders could not have imagined that millennia later a European fortress would crown their city. Yet the continuity of location, the pull of fresh water and maritime access, remained constant. Today, Qalat al-Bahrain is recognised as a UNESCO World Heritage Site. preserved as a symbol of Bahrain's deep historical roots. Visitors walk along excavated foundations, passing from one era into another without leaving the mound. The sea remains, the wind continues, and beneath the visible stone walls of the Portuguese fort lies the memory of Dilmun's ships arriving from distant shores. In the quiet glow of evening on Bahrain's northern coast, the fortress stands as both guardian and archive, a layered citadel where Bronze Age traders, Persian administrators, Islamic builders, and European soldiers each left their imprint, shaping a single mound into one of the Gulf's most enduring crossroads of history. Castro de Coaña. On a green hillside in the region of Asturias in northern Spain, overlooking the Navia River valley, there lies a stone settlement that once held a small but enduring community. From above, the pattern is immediately clear. Circular structures, stone walls, narrow pathways winding between homes. This is Castro de Coaña, one of the best preserved Iron Age hill forts in the Iberian Peninsula. The word Castro refers to fortified settlements built by the peoples of northwestern Iberia during the late Bronze and Iron Ages, roughly between 800 BCE and the Roman conquest in the 1st century BCE. Castro de Coaña occupies a strategic position. The hill provides natural defence on several sides, while artificial stone ramparts reinforce its perimeter. From the summit, one can see across valleys and farmland, a vantage point that once offered security and awareness of approaching movement. Unlike massive urban centres, Coaña was not a city in the classical sense. It was a community, a fortified village. Archaeological evidence suggests that the settlement flourished between the 4th century BCE and the early Roman period. Its layout reveals careful planning. The central area contains clusters of circular and rectangular stone houses arranged along narrow lanes. These houses were built from local slate, stacked without mortar but fitted with skill. The circular form is characteristic of Castro architecture. Thick stone walls formed a stable base, while roofs were likely constructed from wood and thatch. Inside, a single room may have served as living, cooking, and storage space. Hearths have been found within several structures, their placement central to daily life. The defensive system of Castro de Coaña includes multiple ramparts and ditches. Entry into the settlement was controlled through narrow gates, designed to limit access and provide protection during conflict. Life here would have revolved around agriculture, animal husbandry, and small-scale trade. The surrounding fertile valleys supported crops and livestock, while coastal proximity allowed contact with maritime routes. Excavations have revealed ceramics, tools, and personal objects that reflect both local traditions and Roman influence in later phases. As the Roman Empire expanded into northern Spain, many Castro settlements adapted rather than disappeared. At Coaña, evidence suggests continued occupation during the Roman period, with modifications to architecture and material culture. One of the most intriguing features at the site is a structure known as the sauna, or monumental building. Its layout differs from the residential houses. The interior contains a narrow passage leading into a chamber with a stone-lined pit. Some archaeologists interpret this as a ritual steam bath, possibly used for purification ceremonies. Similar structures have been identified at other Castro sites in Galicia and Asturias, suggesting shared cultural practices. Standing within the ruins today, the circular outlines of houses remain clearly visible. Grass grows between stone walls. The hillside is quiet, except for wind moving gently across the landscape. The arrangement of homes suggests a tightly knit community. Lanes between structures are narrow, encouraging proximity rather than separation. This was not an anonymous settlement, it was intimate. The people of Castro de Coaña belonged to Celtic-influenced cultures of northwestern Iberia, though their identity was distinct and localized. They built in stone not for monumentality, but for durability and defence. Unlike Mediterranean cities of the same era, Koanya lacks grand temples or theatres. His architecture reflects practicality, security, continuity. As Roman authority expanded into Hispania, many hill forts were gradually integrated into the imperial system. Some were abandoned, others adapted into Romanised towns. Castro de Coanya eventually declined, but its stone foundations endured. Centuries passed. The hillside remained. Excavations in the 19th and 20th centuries revealed the site's layout and preserved its remains. Today, visitors walk along reconstructed pathways, observing the circular houses arranged as they were more than 2,000 years ago. From the hilltop, the view remains expansive. The Navia River winds through the valley below. Fields stretch outward in soft green patterns. The defensive walls no longer guard against invaders. They guard memory. Castro de Coanya is not defined by monumental scale or imperial ambition. It represents a different form of endurance, that of small communities shaping their environment carefully, building defensively, and adapting to larger political shifts. In the soft light of northern Spain, where mist sometimes settles over hills and the air carries the scent of grass and stone, the hill fort stands quiet and grounded. The circular homes remain as outlines against earth. The ramparts trace the boundary of an ancient way of life, and on that Asturian hillside, Castro de Coanya endures, a testament to resilience, local identity, and the quiet architecture of everyday survival in the Iron Age world. The Selka stone settlement. In the hills of southeastern Albania, above a quiet valley where olive trees and scattered villages rest beneath layered mountains, there are openings in the rock that look almost architectural. From a distance, the cliff face appears natural, but as light shifts across the stone, carved facades begin to emerge. Columns, arched doorways, chambers cut deep into the hillside. This is Selka. More precisely, Selka Ripochtme, an ancient settlement whose stone-cut tombs and fortified structures reveal a layered story of Illyrian and Hellenistic influence. Selka flourished between the 4th and 1st centuries BCE, during a period when the Illyrian tribes controlled much of the Western Balkans. The region sat at a crossroads between the Greek world to the south and emerging Roman influence to the west. The settlement itself was strategically positioned on a hilltop, offering wide views across the valley below. Defensive walls once surrounded the inhabited area, built from large stone blocks fitted tightly together. These fortifications reflect a community aware of both opportunity and threat, but it is the tombs that define Selka's uniqueness. Carved directly into the rock face below the settlement are monumental burial chambers unlike typical Illyrian graves. Their facades resemble classical Greek architecture, complete with pilasters and decorative elements. Some feature false doors carved into stone, symbolic portals marking the passage between life and death. These are not simple burials, they are statements. Archaeologists believe Selka may have been a regional political centre, possibly even associated with Illyrian kings during the late Hellenistic period. The scale of the tombs suggests elite patronage, individuals who wished to display power even in death. Inside the tomb, chambers, carved benches line the walls. Sarcophagi once rested within these spaces. Artifacts discovered during excavation include pottery, weapons, coins, and jewellery, linking Selka to broader Mediterranean trade networks. The architectural style reflects cultural blending. The Illyrians adopted and adapted Hellenistic forms, incorporating Greek decorative motifs into local traditions. Stone became expression, cliff became monument. The hillside setting gives Selka a quiet isolation. There is no large urban sprawl below, no modern city overshadowing the ruins. The landscape remains rural and calm. Walking through the site today, One can trace the outlines of defensive walls above and descend toward the carved tombs below. The contrast between the settlement's utilitarian stonework and the refined tomb facades highlights the difference between daily life and ceremonial legacy. The Illyrian tribes were not unified under a single empire, but operated through shifting alliances and regional leadership. Selkirk's prominence suggests it played a role within those networks, perhaps as a fortified administrative centre overseeing trade routes through the mountains. Over time, Roman expansion into the Balkans altered the political landscape. By the 2nd century BCE, Roman authority extended into Illyrian territories. Local elites were absorbed into imperial systems or displaced. Selkirk gradually declined. The settlement was eventually abandoned, its structures left to weather under Balkan winters and Mediterranean summers. Yet the stone tombs endured. Their carved facades remained visible against the hillside, their interiors hollow but intact. Unlike towering temples or vast amphitheatres, Selkirk does not overwhelm through scale. It invites observation. Its silence is steady, its details subtle. The Selkirk stone settlement reflects a transitional world, one where local tribal identity intersected with expanding Hellenistic culture and approaching Roman power. The tombs capture that moment in carved limestone. At sunset, the rock face glows warm against the valley's fading light. Shadows deepen within the tomb entrances, emphasizing their geometric symmetry. There are no crowds here, no grand restoration, just stone shaped by human intention more than 2,000 years ago. In the still hills of southeastern Albania, where wind moves softly through grass and distant mountains fade into blue haze, Selkirk remains, a settlement carved from rock, guarding the memory of Illyrian elites, and a landscape once shaped by shifting powers, quiet ambition, and the enduring permanence of stone. The ruins of Ubar, Shisar, Oman. In the vast emptiness of southern Oman, where the Rub al-Khali, the empty quarter, stretches in waves of sand beyond the horizon, there is a place where the desert seems to open and reveal something unexpected. Stone walls, collapsed towers, a circular depression in the earth. This is Shisha, often linked to the legend of Ubar, the so-called Atlantis of the Sands. More precisely, the archaeological site is known as Shisha Archaeological Site, and it lies in the Dhofar region of Oman, not far from ancient caravan routes that once carried one of the most valuable commodities of the ancient world, frankincense. For thousands of years, the resin harvested from boswellia trees in southern Arabia was traded across the Mediterranean and Near East. It was burned in temples in Egypt and Rome, carried along desert routes by caravans of camels, and valued as both sacred offering and luxury good. Where there is trade, there must be control, and where there is control, there are settlements. The legend of Ubar appears in ancient texts and later Arab traditions, describing a wealthy city destroyed by divine punishment and swallowed by sand. For centuries, explorers searched for it, imagining a grand metropolis buried beneath dunes. In the late 20th century, satellite imagery and ground surveys led researchers to Shisar, a fortified settlement located at a strategic crossroads of caravan routes. Excavations revealed the remains of a large limestone fort with multiple towers and thick defensive walls. Beneath the structure was something even more striking, a sinkhole. The central part of the fort had collapsed into an underground limestone cavern. Geological studies suggest that the settlement may have been built atop a fragile limestone plateau. Over time, erosion and water movement weakened the subterranean support, eventually causing the ground to give way. If a collapse occurred suddenly, it would have left a dramatic impression, a city partially swallowed by the earth. Shisar itself dates primarily to the early centuries of the Common Era, though evidence suggests earlier occupation in the region. The fort appears to have functioned as a trading outpost, guarding and taxing caravans travelling between the Arabian interior and coastal ports. The walls were built from carefully fitted stone blocks. Towers reinforced the corners, offering wide views of the surrounding desert. Inside, archaeologists found pottery fragments, trade goods, and signs of long-term occupation. Unlike the mythical image of towering palaces, Shisar was modest in scale, functional, strategic. The association with Ubar arises not from monumental grandeur, but from geography. Shisar sits at the edge of the frankincense-producing region and along known caravan pathways. It matches descriptions of a wealthy trade centre controlling desert commerce. Whether Shisar is the true historical Ubar remains debated. What is certain is that this settlement stood at a crossroads of ancient exchange. The desert around it today is stark and quiet. Sand drifts against low stone foundations. The sky feels immense. From aerial views, the circular outline of the collapsed centre is clearly visible, a dark depression contrasting with pale desert soil. It is easy to imagine how such a collapse could inspire legend. The ruins of Ubar remind us that desert landscapes are not empty. They are layered with roots, memory, and commerce. The caravans that once passed here connected Arabia to empires far beyond the dunes. Frankincense burned in distant temples began its journey in places like this. Shisar's decline likely followed shifts in trade patterns. As maritime routes grew more efficient and political structures changed, overland caravan traffic diminished. Without sustained trade, the outpost lost its purpose. Eventually, it was abandoned. Wind and sand softened its walls. Silence returned. The legend of Ubar persisted, carried through stories of a lost city consumed by the desert. Standing at Shisar today, one does not see an immense buried metropolis. One sees a fort at the edge of emptiness. But beneath that simplicity lies a deeper truth, that even remote desert outposts can shape global trade networks, and that fragile geology can alter the fate of settlements in a single moment. In the quiet heat of southern Oman, where the horizon blurs between sand and sky, the ruins of Shisar remain, part history, part legend, a reminder that the desert does not only hide cities. Sometimes it builds their myths.